With Marissa, I've arrived in Japan.
Stations before arriving at Tokyo.
A Nikkei, she has come to see the place of her ancestors and is searching for the links to her native Brazil. As well as modern transport and traditional culture, we find the latest in architecture, as well as huge, crowded cities. And it's from this unique country that many people left for a new life. At the Migration Museum in Yokohama,
actually after the Panama Canal,
we find out more about 150 years of Japanese migration to the Americas and to places like Brazil. To track down Marissa's family, we journey across Shikoku Island and soon arrive in Kochi, home to around 1/3 people and capital of one of Japan's 47 prefectures. From the very start of Japanese migration to Brazil in 1908, people from Kochi were included. Within 50 years, at least 6,000 had left. That's more than 2 people every week. To find Marissa's roots, we go to Tosa, a smaller city just west of Kochi, where the local tourist office are helping us.
We are in Tosa City, where my parents came from, and this is Shoko Masui, and she's been very helpful.
So about 1,400 people moved from Tosa City because the life here was really bad, so they had to move to Brazil and then make their living.
So, with less than 1% of Kochi's population, Tosa has provided more than 20% of its migrants to Brazil. Marissa's mother was one of those migrants, and that's what brings us to this village, Narakawa, where we meet Mr. Katayama. This is the first time Marissa has met Mr. Katayama, but he invites us to see some family photos.
これがね、おじいさんは私の、で春太郎と言います。それからこちらがかやと言います。夫婦です。
His grandparents and Marissa's great-grandparents.
私の親父、父親がこれです。この若さんで亡くなっています。
Mr. Katayama's father was a soldier in the Imperial Japanese Army and never returned from China. An only child, Mr. Katayama remained in this village, becoming headmaster at the local school. Marissa's mother and her family left this village in 1929.
We are in Narukawa. My grandmother, my mother's mother, used to live up on that hill where there are those white houses. I was very pleased to come here because I met my mother's cousin, and he showed us the picture of my great-grandmother and great-grandfather. So it was very emotional to see all those pictures. I didn't know that my grandfather was the oldest son to immigrate. Usually it's the second or third son who immigrate or who go abroad.
Also in Tosa is the village of Nikkei, and here is the family home of the Maritas. Marissa's father lived in this house until he left for Brazil just before his 12th birthday.
They plant these flowers here. Yeah. This is the altar that they have, you know, that one. This one. This is my grandfather, and in the middle my grandmother, and this is my uncle, my father's brother.
While Marissa's father made a new life far away, his older brother became a respected member of this community, serving as local mayor. After paying respects, it's time to catch up with family news.
My father's sister, and she's also my father's sister. These two are my father's parents, my grandparents. And these are my cousins.
英語もないで別に。じゃあしてます。取りましょうか、取りましょう。
Also in Nikkei is the home of Mr. Morisawa, Marissa's cousin and our kind host. Like many generations before him, he has stayed working the land, now running this strawberry farm.
食べてない。
And his son, who lives next door, is in the same line of business.
じゃあお休みその。
そうそう。なんでこれの苗。
Marissa had to relearn Japanese to make contact with this letter. But now, the family hope to stay in touch through social media. With the help of Mr. and Mrs. Morisawa and the local tourist office, we learn more about the place Marissa's parents left as children nearly 90 years ago. Not far from her mother's home is Kiyotaki Temple, first established hundreds of years ago. And here we find not tourists, but pilgrims. Like much of Japan's heavily populated coastal area, Nikkei has been intensively cultivated. It took 100 years to change the course of the river Nyodo and avoid the regular flooding that was a further incentive to move away. Something that is recognized in this monument.
Now they changed the movement of the river, and so now people can plant here and they can make their lives.
At the City Council, officials tell us more about these extensive works. One of them is the son of Marissa's mother's cousin. We also visit Tosa Library, where staff bring out several boxes of documents about links with Brazil. Marissa soon finds links to her family.
Do you know?
Maybe my uncle and aunt know. This is my father's name.
And to her home in Sao Paulo.
Yeah, this was in Pinheiros, this was in Galvão Bueno.
移民のね、 戸田市のね、図書館で調べるらえ。そのデジュー。
He was my doctor when I was a child.
そう見てもらったんだ。
He was my grandmother's cousin's son. And he was a medical doctor and he lived in Pinheiros. He had his office in Teodoro Sampaio.
書かれた本をまたいただいてます。
This is a dissertation about immigrations in Brazil, and it includes, of course, people from this area. We are in the village where my father was born. He was born over there, and my mom was born over there. And I'm very pleased to meet one of my cousins here today. This is my cousin Atsuhiko Morisawa.
もう会えんと思ったけど、久しぶりいうか、会えて嬉しいです。最高です。
はい、
はい、
私もとっても
ありがとうご
嬉しい。
ざいます。
どうもありがとうございました。
ありがとうございます。よく、
はい、
彼女のお父さんもここで子供の頃はよく遊んだと思います。泳いだり走ったり。
Mr. Morisawa shows us around Kochi City, starting with the museum. And then we go to the library, where we find more documents about Kochi's links with Brazil.
And this picture is here, and the girl or the lady who's singing it is Miyake Rosa Miyake. This scrapbook, which is a collection of articles of people who went to Brazil.
Kochi has a magnificent castle which dates from the 17th and 18th centuries and is just one of 12 castles in Japan that has survived from feudal times. We learned that local citizens such as Sakamoto Ryoma have played an important part in creating today's Japan, of which this vibrant city is part.
So, me is over there. This is the market where my cousin brings his strawberries. The castle is there. And here we are on top of the mountain to see this lovely place.
At the Chikurin temple, which dates from the early 8th century, we pay our respects.
This visit to Kochi was very interesting because I got to know a lot about my family background, my mother's side and my father's side. Last time I was here, I just visited my father's side relatives, and now I met my mother's cousin and his family.
Before helping to create a new story for the local newspaper. And then we depart, taking the same route as many migrants who travelled across the island of Shikoku and arrived at the port of Kobe. Some 250,000 Japanese people left from this city for Brazil. And from 1928, they stayed at this emigrant centre before leaving. Marissa's mother, then 7 years old, would have arrived here in November 1928 in one of the first groups to stay at this centre. Mr. Mitsuyuki shows us around the exhibition.
They made this bed narrow so that you couldn't get seasick. There were 50 rooms like this, and 12 people slept in each one. And also in the back there were some, and 500 people could sleep there.
いろいろとこうしていて、この前にいろんなものを買い物して、そして行きます。
絵本に書いてあったのね。買い物に行きましたとかなんか。This building was built as if it were a boat, a ship, so that they can start getting used to it from here. Each person could carry 45 kilos of baggage, but if they wanted to carry more, they had to pay extra. My mother and her family stayed here before going to Brazil, and through the exhibition here we could have an idea of what kind of life they had during the trip and also in Brazil.
We also find that this building is more than a museum.
We are at the Kobe Immigration Center, where they have an exhibition about all the immigrants that left from here to different countries in the world. And exceptionally today we met many Brazilians preparing some Brazilian food, and also if you need any document or if you need any psychological support, you can come to this place and they will help you.
Then we follow the path to the dock, the route followed by many people from Kochi and elsewhere as they left Japan. Kobe is now a thriving city and port, but in the park near the dock, it remembers those who left for other places in the world.
We are at the Kobe port. From here, the immigrants went to Brazil. Children enjoyed the ship trip, and mainly when the sea was rough, the old people, the grown-ups I mean, would be sick, and the children would be enjoying the trip. It was quite an adventure for everybody, I think.